Well, joining us now, Ambassador Nirupama Rao, a former Foreign Secretary of India. She's been watching this visit very, very closely. Wonderful to have you on this program, ma'am. What is your big takeaway?
Thank you, Vishnu. Well, if you ask me what the key takeaways or the importance really of this visit, I think beyond the pomp and circumstance, it clearly signals that the India-US relationship has come of age, and that there is a mature understanding between our leaders and governments about strategic convergence, about the willingness to understand each other's points of view on the global situation, which may not always coincide, and that areas of difference in perspectives don't have to detract from the overall strength and substance of the bilateral relationship between two large democracies. And another takeaway was that the US bet, if I may use that word, on India is clear and reaffirmed, and that India, we are seen by the US as dependable and trustworthy partners, as equal partners, as reliable and responsible partners. And from that flows the political will to engage in the strategic technology partnership with India that you just spoke of in various areas and cutting edge areas, including in defense and security and AI, quantum, semiconductors and space. So it's not, not just the pomp and circumstance surrounding an official state visit. This is a relationship founded on pragmatism. It's founded on realism, which should be the cardinal principle of everyone's foreign policy, and hardcore recognition of the need, and this is where I think the China factor also comes in, to strengthen security and deterrence in the Indo-Pacific and all that it takes to achieve this goal.
To what extent is China the bedrock of the strategic relationship or convergence of views between India and the United States?
Now, both our countries, India and the US, have a very complex and very challenged relationship with China, with, unfortunately, with armed conflict as a possibility that can't be ruled out today. Now, building deterrence against China is a legitimate need for both countries, the US and India. And our mutual consultations on China today are intense and in-depth. Now, this does not mean that each of us expects the other to fight our battles for us. We retain the autonomy for decision-making, obviously, on such strategic issues. But that doesn't mean, on the other hand, that we will not support each other's ability to build effective deterrence against China in the Indo-Pacific and work with our other strategic partners on these matters. President Biden, for instance, referred to groupings like the Quad as having bent the arc of history for the global good. And what I think he meant is that such partnerships build peace, they build security and stability in the Indo-Pacific for the work they do in many areas, even beyond defense and security, to help countries in the region and strengthen a rules-based order.
Ambassador, the importance of dealing with visa issues. At the end of the day, this relationship is based on equations between people in the US, people over here, H-1B visas, and the fact that for so many years, and it often didn't make any sense, people would need to come back to India to renew their H-1B visa. That's difficult. But now America has taken that step of working through their legislation and their laws to make it a bit easier for Indians. The issue of visas, is this not also a really important step?
Yes, it is. It is definitely a step, albeit at this moment a small one, because I think it's still going to be confined to a few visas, H-1B visas being issued without people having to return to India. But it's certainly a very good and important and notable beginning. And I think with that, tied up with that is also the announcement of better consular access, because there will be a US consulate opened in Bengaluru. There will be a US consulate opened in Ahmedabad, which will make it much easier for people applying for visas to be able to finish their paperwork and not have to travel to other centers in order to appear for interviews and for their biometrics. That's a good thing. And of course, the announcement that there will be an Indian consulate in Seattle, and I think there will be announcements of 2 more to be opened up. So I think that that is also a very positive development. So it speaks for much better connectivity on the people-to-people level and for professionals who move between the two countries. And this is extremely important and crucial in terms of the building of the technology partnership also.
You know, ma'am, a small anecdote, and this is what I found a real irony. As you know, there's this huge jet engine deal which is taking place. General Electric engines for the Tejas fighter are now going to be built in India. That's great. When we, did our nuclear tests, there were sanctions in place, and one of the projects which was immediately hit was Tejas, what is then called the light combat aircraft. It was being developed with very active American assistance. Now, all these years later, not only are the Americans collaborating with us, but they're transferring the engine to India to be built in India. You were Foreign Secretary, sometime after that. How has that relationship gone from one of mistrust at one level to this?
Today, it's all a matter of trust, Venu and Vishnu. So, the trust that exists at the leadership level, you saw that very manifest during the visit in the manner in which President and Mrs. Biden went out of their way with a great deal of finesse and forethought to welcome our Prime Minister. This is an indication, I think, of how far we've traveled. And in addition to that, if you look at the manner in which over these years, we've built the structure of this relationship, we've added many stories to it. There are so many multiple touch points in this relationship today. So to answer your question, we've come a long way from those days when, we had our nuclear tests and the US imposed sanctions. I remember we used to call them special economic measures and not sanctions. But they did, create estrangement in the relationship at that time. But then you had, the conscious steps taken with a great deal of strategic foresight by the two governments, starting with, with the discussions that Mr. Jaswant Singh, the late Mr. Jaswant Singh had with Mr. Stroke Talbot, which paved the way for the nuclear deal. So there's been a conscious effort on both parts in recognition of the fact that India and the US can work together to create that effective strategic balance that this region and this part of the world needs. So what you see today with the GE jet engine deal is this decision, this manifestation of political will by both the governments to really enter into arrangements of such sort, which will be to their mutual benefit.
A final question to you, and one of the most fascinating parts of what we've seen in the last 48 hours, space, and the fact that America wants India as a real partner, a serious partner. We've had a relationship with NASA for many, many decades, but I think the future and the Artemis agreements, the fact that we want a rules-based order even in space, and America wants us to sign on to that, we are all too happy to do that. And then perhaps the optics of it would be an Indian, as in an initial phase, going to the International Space Station. But the larger collaboration in space and serious, profound technological cooperation between NASA and ISRO is certainly part of a shared future.
Oh, absolutely. And as the joint statement, I think, talked about it, our collaboration, the extent of our partnership ranges from the seas to the stars, Vishnu, today. So we are in that beam me up stage in our relationship, really.
You know, ma'am, it's one of the main points in that joint agreement. It's right up in the top, which is, I think, significant. Thanks, ma'am, very much. Wonderful speaking to you, as always.